Another book I want to bring to your attention, which I really haven't advertised until I was talking to our speaker tonight, Sunday, it kind of reminded me, but there is a series out there. It's called Roadside Geology. This happens to be the one, Roadside Geology of Colorado. And about 98% of the states do have their own roadside geology of their state that's been written. It's published by Mountain Press Publishing Company. And I will tell you, don't look for a new copy of the Pennsylvania one because it doesn't exist. There's an older version which you might be able to find at book sales, but Mountain Press does not have any new ones in of Pennsylvania. So if I want a project, there's a project you can do. You can write a Pennsylvania roadside geology book for Mountain Press. So anyway.
Jerry, what is the edition of the Colorado roadside?
This one I have is 2002.
Thanks.
2002, yeah. Second edition, the one I have. So just, you can see it again. Roadside geology books are pretty good. All right, you want to hear a joke before I introduce the speaker? Everybody's going to leave the room anyway. So, anyway, there's these two older women, Dolly and Ruth, and they are grandmothers, not to the same children actually. But Dolly and Ruth were talking one day about their grandchildren, and Dolly said, every birthday, when the birthday comes around of a grandchild, she sends them a check and a card, and she never hears from them. They don't send her a thank you card or anything. And Ruth says, I do the same thing. I send them a check and I send them a card, and I actually get a thank you back from the grandkids, and they even come to see me. So I get a visit out of it. And so Dolly said, well, what makes it different? Ruth says, I don't sign the checks. So kids have to bring the checks back to get grandma to sign them. So anyway, and I do want to, before I go any further, I do want to thank, and I see he's in the room tonight, Darryl Fry. He's the one that put a bug in my ear a few months ago about Herbert Hoover being a mining engineer, and that's how we kind of got Colorado bound because of Elizabeth, who I've been talking to about doing a Herbert Hoover program along with the Mining Museum. Hopefully it's going to be on the schedule in October. And while I was talking to Elizabeth, she mentioned this gentleman named Fred Mark would probably love to do a mining history of Leadville, Colorado for your room. So that's how we kind of got tied into Colorado here. And I actually did have a conversation with Fred on Sunday, a little practice session, and got a little glimpse of the program. It's going to be really, really good, by the way. And before I go any further, I have something for you to think about. Okay, Leadville, Colorado, in 1880 had a population of 16,000 people. So how many saloons do you think Leadville had in 1880 with 16,000 people as their population? How many saloons? Just keep that answer in your head, okay? At the end of Fred's program, as always, we will use the chat for any questions that you may have. But anyway, Fred does live in Leadville. 37 years of professional experience. Got a degree in geology from the University of Idaho. And he's just done a slew of environmental permitting, monitoring, compliance work. A lot of research on, of course, the history of the mining area, particularly the one he's going to be talking about tonight. He is the website and researcher. You might want to go to this website called Root of the Silver Kings and check all of that out because he maintains it and researchers. But he's compiled maps of mines, townships, smelters, railroads, all in Leadville. And he is a volunteer for the National Mining Museum and Hall of Fame. So that's why he knows the museum very well too. Authored several educational books on the geology and history along the mineral belt trail, for example. And what I like about him when he's not doing geology is his hobby is a farmer and winemaker. Now, Fred, hardest thing I drink is Mountain Dew. Okay, so I don't drink any wine, but I might taste some of yours if I would ever come out and see you. So without further ado, we welcome Fred Mark into the room, and I'll hand it over to Fred.
Thank you for the introduction, Jerry, and I'll go ahead and start the program.
Okay.
So I'm going to be talking about mining history of Leadville, Colorado. And Leadville is located in the Colorado Rockies. It's about 2 hours drive from Denver. Via interstate highway and a good paved highway, the roads are well maintained. You can travel them in the winter, except maybe a few times when the snow is heavy. Leadville is situated at 10,152 feet, just east of the Mosquito Range. And there's a 14,000-foot mountain just east of Leadville, Mount Sherman. It's located in the Arkansas Valley. And right now, I'll mention something about another mine in the area. It's here northeast of Leadville. It's a Climax mine. It's one of the world's largest primary molybdenum producers. It's been operating since 2012. It's possible it will stay open until 2060. I'm not going to talk about it because it's outside of the Leadville mining district. This is a photo of Leadville around 1876. It was a collection of cabins then. By 1882, this is a bird's eye view of Leadville. Leadville had a population of 16,000 and probably another 16,000 in the surrounding area. It had exploded. It was astounding. So here's a little bit of demographics of Leadville. This is from the 1880 business directory. There were 981 businesses in Leadville. And here's the answer to your question. There were 118 saloons. But in addition, there were 90 lawyers, 70 mining companies, 62 grocery stores, 60 mining brokers, 54 physicians, including Dr. Mary Bates, 39 real estate companies, 32 restaurants, 31 mining engineers, 2 breweries, and 2 undertakers. And the undertakers weren't too busy. In 1880, there were 600 deaths. So you average that out, that might be 2 a day that they could split. Probably there were times when they were busier and less busy. By 1880, Leadville had 2 hospitals, 8 schools, including a high school, 7 churches, and they were well attended, 15 secret and benevolent societies, including a temperance club, which may have had good attendance and need, 1 trade union. Leadville was served by 2 railroads. It had complete city and county government, including courts, law enforcement, and commissioners. It had a municipal water system, gas lighting, and a telephone system. By 1900, Leadville was served by 3 railroads with 43 miles of track. And the Ibex Spur at 11,800 feet was probably the highest railroad in North America at the time. This is a view of Harrison Avenue, Main Street of Leadville, looking south. It's probably late summer or early fall, 1879. The Tabor Opera House is under construction, and it was a magnificent building. It seated 800 people and was said to be the finest opera house at the time between St. Louis and San Francisco. What I really want to show in the slide, though, are the telephone poles, part of the 1879 telephone system. This is a stage view of the opera house taken in the very early 80s. And what's really interesting is the gas lights. Now, the mining in Leadville district began in 1860 and continued until 1999. The district produced 29 million tons of ore, valued at $1.2 trillion 2020 GDP adjusted dollars. Production included 113 tons of gold, 9,100 tons of silver, 1.2 million tons of lead, 1 million tons of zinc, 0.6 million tons of copper, as well as significant amounts of manganese, iron, and pyrite. The pyrite was roasted to produce sulfuric acid. This is a graph of Leadville production from 1860 till 1999. And I want to thank Vince Matthews for sharing the data between 1860 and 1928. He actually typed all this in by hand when we had trouble trying to scan it, OCR it. The Black Cloud mine, which operated from 1970 to 1999, is shown on the right, and its production seems very high, but that's an exaggeration. This is in unadjusted dollars, and that's a result of post-World War II inflation. Now, in order to understand the mineral deposits in Leadville, we have to go back to Mississippian time, about 350 million years ago, when Colorado was covered by a shallow sea and was south of the equator. If you'd been in Leadville at the time, probably this would have been the view out your window. And if you were in a glass-bottom boat, you'd see probably sharks, crinoids, coral, assorted fishes in the shallow sea. Now, the water was very warm, and it encouraged carbonate and calcium, the carbonate girls and the calcium boys, to get together and set up housekeeping as the Leadville limestone. At 310 million years, Colorado is now north of the equator slightly. And because of compression from the south, the area Colorado is uplifted. And the Leadville limestone was exposed to caverns and sinkholes developed in the Leadville limestone at that time. And that's known as a karst. This is an example of a karst in Plitvice National Park in Croatia. About 300 million years ago, the karst was covered up by deltas, and sandstone and black shales were deposited. Now, about 70 million years ago, the area was intruded by igneous rock, and the igneous rock forms sills above the Leadville limestone, and it followed the old karst surface, which is an area of weakness. About 40 million years ago, replacement mineralization developed in the Leadville limestone when an igneous body intruded east of Leadville, and hydrothermal solutions emanated from it, once again, following the karst zone of weakness at the base of the white porphyry and the top of the Leadville limestone. And in certain areas, the solutions deposited mineralization, including gold, silver, lead, and zinc. And this is just a diagram showing the Leadville limestone, known as the older name blue limestone, the mineralization at the base of the white porphyry. This is a map of the gold ore chute in Leadville, and it looks very much like a cavern. And in fact, if you compare it to caverns in maps of caverns in other locations, the resemblance is striking. This shows the ore bodies that were mined in Leadville. They're shown in orange, blue, and green. And some of these ore bodies were up to 3,000 feet long, up to 200 feet thick, and up to 500 feet wide. Now, between the time of mineralization 40 million years ago and the present time, or 1860, when the discoveries were first made, Leadville area was full, the rocks in the Leadville area were folded, faulted, and eroded to where the mineral deposits were exposed to water carrying oxygen. The oxygen reacted with sulfur in the minerals to produce sulfuric acid. The sulfuric acid leached metals from the mineral deposits, and the solutions moved down through the mineral deposits to the water table, where enriched deposits were formed above the water table and below the water table. And typically, this weathering forms 5 zones. Generally, sometimes if there's gold present, placer gold will develop as a residual on the top of the mineral deposit, because gold is resistant to chemical and physical weathering. The top of the mineral deposit is a gossan. It's silicon, basically silicon and iron. The name comes from the Cornish word for blood. It's red. And another word for it is Eisenhut in German, or iron hat. And we'll see a claim that was named iron hat later in the show. Below the gossan is leach zone, where most of the metallic values are gone, been carried down further. It's very low grade. Below that and above the water table, the metals are deposited in an assemblage known as a carbonate zone. This is bonanza material. This is bonanza ore. Silver, lead, zinc are deposited here. And this was what was mined in the early days and caused the explosion of production and value from Leadville. I like to think of it as a treasure chest. Below the carbonate zone is the enriched zone. Solutions, the enriched zone occurs below the water table. Solutions carrying gold and native silver and copper were deposited here. And some of this ore was extremely valuable. We'll talk about the Ibex mine and the Bonanza gold deposits discovered there. That gold occurred in the enriched zone. Another treasure chest. The primary zone is made up of sulfide minerals that are unaltered. This ore typically is not as high a grade as what occurs in the enriched zone or in the carbonate zone, but it still carries good values. And basically after the depletion of most of the carbonate, the high grade ore in the carbonate zone and enriched zone, it was the meat and potatoes that were produced, minerals were produced from in Leadville. This is a cross section of, once again, the Pando porphyry, the white porphyry above the Leadville limestone with an altered ore body on the left, carbonates and sulfides below the base of weathering. This is going to be, I'm just going to show you a summary of mining activities in the 19th century in Leadville. First, California Gulch. This is actually looking west toward the Mosquito Range. Excuse me, east toward the Mosquito Range. First placer discovery was made in 1860 in California Gulch. Lode gold was discovered and mined in the Printer Boy mine beginning in 1868. Lead carbonate was discovered in the rock claim in 1874. Bonanza silver was discovered on Friar Hill in 1878. This is what really set the district off. By 1887, deep development began in the district, and actually mineralization and ore was discovered within the town city limits and residential areas of Leadville. 1893, Bonanza gold was discovered in the Ibex mine on Breese Hill. In the 20th century, once again, California Gulch. The Yak Tunnel was completed 3.5 miles, and it served as haulage of ore from the interior and the east, the far east side of the district, as well as drainage. Bonanza zinc carbonate ore was discovered in 1910 in the Wolftone mine. Mining began in the Resurrection mine in 1941. And the last mine to operate in Leadville was the Black Cloud, which began operation in 1970. Now, how do gold placers form? This was the first mineral occurrence that was mined in Leadville in 1860. How do they form? First, gold is freed by weathering from rock. The gold will move down slope with colluvium. Once the colluvium reaches the stream concentrates the gold as a placer on the top of bedrock. And the mechanism is fairly simple. Gold is very heavy, and during flood stage, the stream might liquefy its entire gravel bed and shake it. Gold being heavy will settle to the bottom. Placers can also form as veins are eroded. This is an example of placer distribution below a vein, downstream from a vein. So Pikes Peak Gold Rush began in 1859. The discovery was actually in 1858 at the confluence of the Platte River and Cherry Creek near what is now downtown Denver. And in January of 1859, the gold rush was triggered by an article in the New York Times that stated gold had actually been discovered. So in the spring of 1859, Argonauts set off for Pikes Peak, actually the confluence of Cherry Creek and the Platte River. During 1859 gold rush, prospectors made discovery along the east side of the mountains and worked maybe 50 to 75 miles into the mountains. By the end of 1859, gold was known to have occurred in the Arkansas Valley. However, it was too remote to have been thoroughly prospected. It waited until 1860, in the spring of 1860, when the discoveries in California Gulch were made. And at that time, the discoveries were made in April of 1860, and the article I'm going to quote here with descriptions was published in the Rocky Mountain News, May 9th, 1860, so word spread fast. Initially, the deposit was described as 6 feet of pay dirt found at a depth of 7 feet. At the top, paid 25 cents a pan. The bottom, $1 a pan. It will give astonishing value if of any extent. The article went on to say, do not stampede. No one listened. By the end of 1860, it said that California Gulch produced $2 million worth of gold, 9.5 billion 2020 dollars, GDP adjusted, at USGS monograph 12. However, there was no mechanism to report gold production or record gold production at the time. So these are estimates. There are estimates that say 5 million. I don't think it's never will really be known how much was produced. Now, interestingly enough, the 1860 census enumerated California Gulch. A few interesting facts from that census, and I want to thank Trevor Mark for compiling this data. The 2 youngest Argonauts in California Gulch were 1 male and 1 female, 1 year old. There were 2 males that were 80 years old, and these must have been some geezers. The overall median age was 27. Median age for females was 22. And many of the females were younger. I think they were probably family members. There were 36 females in the Gulch and 2,000 males. A census of what was listed as Colorado territory, but it probably is more Kansas territory, indicated that 6% of the population of territory were in California Gulch at the time. Now, a reporter was sent to California Gulch in September of 1860, and he interviewed all of the miners that would talk to him to get their production. He interviewed operators of 31 claims, and they reported a cumulative production of $89,000, $14.2 million 2020 dollars, or 4,700 ounces of gold. Now, there were probably 150 claims in the Gulch up and down. The best pan reported was from 5 below, and claims at that time were numbered in sequence above or below the discovery. Claims were 100 feet long along the stream. 5 below would have been 50 feet below 500 feet below the discovery. And the best pan there was $7.50, 35,000 2020 dollars. 21 above had the best run. Using 6 men, they produced $410 in a day. That would be 1.9 million 2020 dollars. 21 above was operated by HAW Tabor and Company. In the future, Leadville would be even better to HAW. Now, California Gulch, at best of times, is slightly more than a trickle. So in order to placer mine, which requires great amounts of water, ditches were dug. Claims were consolidated, cluvial and hydraulic mining began. Some of the ditches went as far as 6 miles to the east fork of the Arkansas River. Others tapped Evans Gulch and Iowa Gulch. This area will be blown up to the side here. And in looking at high resolution DEM of the California Gulch area, I noticed an area that was churned up. It's outlined by yellow. And I think that that was probably colluvial mining. done basically outside an active stream with men shoveling into sluice boxes. Later, with the water supply, hydraulic mining began. This is a picture looking down California Gulch, probably 1874. Now, in 1868, Printer Boy was discovered. It's a gold vein, but it's lode mining. And Upper Oro was also discovered, or also founded to supply goods and services to the miners that operated the Printer Boy mine. Lode mining is different than placer mining. In lode mining, rock has to be broken with explosives, hauled out, and milled. These miners are using double jacks to drill a hole for explosives. Now, the ore that's produced has to be milled. Typically, it's milled at that time in a stamp mill. Ore comes in, it's dumped into a crusher where the ore is reduced to size probably -2 inch. From the crusher, the ore goes down and is fed into a stamp mill where it's reduced to something smaller than sand sized. This is what a stamp mill looks like. It's basically a series of steel or iron pistons that are moved up and down by a camshaft. It can be powered by steam or water. From the stamps, the ore goes down onto an amalgamation table. Those are copper plates that are coated with mercury. And the gold from the ore amalgamates with the mercury and stays on the copper plates. Periodically, the plates are removed, the amalgam is scraped off, and the gold recovered by retorting or heating to drive off the mercury. This is a picture around 1873 that shows the Printer Boy and Upper Oro, the town that established around the Printer Boy mine. And if you look at this site now, it's heavily timbered. But by 1873, a lot of the timber had been removed to fire boilers, to heat houses, etc. The discovery of lead and silver carbonates in 1874 began with hydraulic placer mining. In 1874, hydraulic mine revealed silver-bearing lead carbonate float known as heavy rock. It was identified as lead carbonate by Alvinus Wood, who was a principal in the hydraulic mine. He was also a graduate engineer from the University of Michigan. He followed the trail of heavy rock float, carbonate float, up California Gulch to its source and located the rock claim in 1874. The rock claim was located actually right at the contact where mineralization was, of course, of the contact of the white porphyry and the Leadville limestone. And over the next 2 years, he followed that contact to the north, locating many claims. This series of claims would become the foundation of the iron mine, which operated into the 1920s and produced millions of dollars worth of dividends. I have an interesting story about AB. I was in the museum a few years ago around Christmas, and some young ladies came in and they were curious about AB because he was their great uncle. And I got to visiting with them and I showed them how they could find where the rock discovery was and told them what I knew about AB at the time. And it was interesting because you always hear about miners that lost all their money. But apparently AB did very well. And the young ladies said were both attending private colleges back east. And all of their expenses for college were paid by AB's estate. So with the discovery of carbonate, mineralization, and ore, there needed to be processing in the area. Although some of it was being shipped out, there was opportunity for smelting in the area. So in 1876, a 300-ton shipment was made from the rock mine to a smelter in St. Louis. It went by wagon to Colorado Springs or Pueblo, and then by rail to St. Louis. It was found to have 60% lead, and it was profitable. And that attracted the interest of the smelter company, St. Louis Smelting and Refining. And they decided to build a mill in the south end of what is now Leadville. This is a photograph of the smelter in 1877. And also a sampler was built. A sampler is a business that basically buys small lots of ore, crushes it, samples it, and homogenizes it so that it can be sold to a smelter. Smelters don't like variable feed. Note all the wood piled up. The wood was used to fuel boilers. You can't fuel a blast furnace in a smelter with wood. It needs high carbon material, either charcoal or coal coke. And a large charcoal producing industry built up around Leadville, once again, using the local timber. At first, making charcoal in covered trenches, later using brick ovens. By 1879, there had been a boom in smelting. 15 smelters had been constructed or planned. Not all of them, some never started, many were unsuccessful. By 1884, only 3 were operating. This is the Arkansas Valley smelter pictured in 1900. It was the longest operating and closed in 1959. I just like this picture. 65 tons of silver bullion waiting to be shipped from Leadville. Leadville boomed. Once again, this is the production graph of Leadville. When Leadville really took off in spring of 1878 with the discovery of the Little Pittsburgh mine. Now, and discoveries on Friar Hill in 1878. From 1874 to 1877, the mineralized trend, shown in blue here, was followed across the face of Iron Hill and across the face of Carbonate Hill. And projecting it, anyway, many discoveries were made. Projecting the occurrence on Carbonate Hill north indicated that there must be ore beneath Friar Hill. However, Friar Hill was a tough nut to crack. It's covered by glacial till and outwash that's up to 200 feet. So a prospector would have to go through that till and outwash, including boulders, maybe up to 10 or 15 feet in diameter, that would have to be drilled and blasted. And it took a long time for the discoveries to be made. In the spring of 1878, Little Pittsburgh was discovered, and it was the first large tonnage of very high-grade carbonate ore discovered. High grade had been discovered, but no tonnages of this size. The principals in the discovery were Hook, Riche, and H.A.W. Tabor. Tabor, by then, this is his senatorial photo. He was served a short term in the U.S. Senate. This is his senatorial photo in 1883. And as he'd come to California Gulch in the spring of 1860 with his wife Augusta and his 2-year-old son Maxie, and they prospered. He opened a store in Oro II in 1868. He was a successful business owner. His net worth in the 1870 census was $13,000, 3.9 million adjusted 2016 dollars. In 1878, he was a wealthy businessman. He owned stores in Leadville, Oro. He was mayor of Leadville and also the postmaster of Leadville. August Riche was a German immigrant, came to the US in 1852. After the Civil War, he went to South Park, which is immediately on the other side of the park range, of the mosquito range from Leadville. Worked as a prospector, miner, and shoemaker. 1874, he crossed the mosquito range to California Gulch, learned the district, prospected, mined at the Printer Boy. Partnered with Hook in 1877. The Little Pittsburgh discovery, described by Hook. After Fryer's discovery on Friar Hill in early April of 1878, April 10th, Hook and Riche went to Friar Hill and looked, and on the 20th, and they decided that Fryer had found float that had broken off from an outcrop. And they thought that if they went uphill from Fryer's location, they would find the outcrop. But they were poor. They needed a stake from someone. They went to Harrison, who was indisposed, and then they went to Tabor, who funded them. Now, every major discovery seems like every major mining district has an everyman story that involves a prospector sitting down and accidentally picking up rock, or possibly his burro kicking over rock, or possibly stumbling while he was chasing a deer. And the discovery at Little Pittsburgh is no exception. There's the jug story. And this involves the stake that Tabor had given them that included a jug. And the jug began to speak to Riche and Hook on their way out of town. And they stopped under a tree and consumed its contents. The next morning when they woke up, they decided what better place to dig than right here. Well, Hook said of that story, while Riche and I punished many a jug, we did not punish that jug. The true story is really much more interesting. This is a cross section from Emmons, volume 1883, that shows the Little Pittsburgh discovery. The wash in the area was up to 200 feet thick, although where it's pictured here, it wasn't quite that thick. Riche and Hook located the claim on the 22nd of April and had ore on the first day of May. They had originally started sinking the shaft further south, but the boys at the Union claim south of them notified them to stop. They moved further north, which was a good move. The shaft was 29 feet, the shallowest location of the shallowest least thickness of wash and glacial till on Friar Hill. Had they sunk the shaft 10 feet further south, they would have missed the ore. The ore was only an inch thick when they cut it, but they drifted along it 30 feet. And in that 30 feet, they came into 30 feet of ore. The first ore assay was $200 a ton, and they had over 40 feet of ore a little further in. The first major discovery of carbonates, high-grade carbonates. This is the picture of the Little Pittsburgh in the spring of 1878. Pretty rudimentary mine, a horse swim and a head frame, and a bucket. Friar Hill in 1878 in the spring looked like this, Little Pittsburgh discovery. By 1879, things had taken off. Little Pittsburgh discovery there. So of the discoverers, what was their history? Hook sold out to Tabor and Riche for a total of $150,000. That includes dividends that he received from the partnership. 41 million today's dollars. He died wealthy. Riche sold out to Tabor for a total of $400,000, including dividends, $107 million today equivalent. He died poor, working as a janitor in the Colorado State Capitol. Tabor sold the Little Pittsburgh claim to Chafee and Moffett in late 1878 for $1 million, $270,000 of today's money. And if you think about it, back then there were no sales taxes, income taxes, federal tax, state tax, etc. Astonishing wealth. Tabor lost most of his fortune along the way and passed away in 1899, serving as postmaster of Denver. Now, Chafee and Moffett decided there's another way to make money rather than mining and producing ore. It's mining stockholders. And they capitalized the Little Pittsburgh Consolidated with two other mines and sold stock. The company paid $1 million of dividends in 1879, but ran out of ore, high-grade ore, in 1880. Now, by the mid-1880s, all of the outcrop and shallow ore had been found, and exploration began in deeper parts of the basin, and also geologic interpretation began to improve. Now, the Iron Fault had been mapped by Emmons, but it takes miners some time. They're very practical people, and it takes some time to believe geologic interpretations. At this time, the Argentine mine, owned by the Mikado Company, found that the Argentine ore body was terminated to the west by the Iron Fault. The drop-down side is to the left where the bumps are. This is a section along from the Argentine mine looking north. The Argentine ore body terminated with a fault is shown here. Animation of what happened, what the fault did to the ore body is shown here. So the Mikado Company theorized that by sinking a shaft west of the iron fault, they could hit the ore body, which is in fact what they did. And in 1887, they hit carbonate mineralization at a depth of about 400 feet. It was a great success. They also discovered an additional fault to the west, the Mikado Fault, which is unknown at the time. Shafts were sunk west of the Mikado Fault, and the ore body was found to continue to the west. Now, in 1893, there was a financial panic, and it affected production in Leadville, but not nearly as drastically as it's made out to be. This is a graph of the price of silver from 1870 to 1900. And another thing that happened during the Panic of 1893 was the Silver-Sherman Purchase Act was repealed. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act was begun to support the price of silver. The price of silver, as you can see, had been declining until 1890 because of large production from both Leadville and Nevada. The price support may have done a little bit at the beginning. The government was obligated to buy a certain amount of silver every month in the open market. But it seems to me that it didn't really change much, and perhaps the price of silver declined even more rapidly during that time because perhaps the subsidy encouraged additional production. It was repealed in 1893. There was a sudden knee-jerk drop in the price of silver. Many mines in the Leadville area closed at that time, but the silver price recovered. The mines made deals at the time with their laborers to reduce the price of labor base price from $3 to $2.50. Mines reopened, production resumed. And as we'll see later, when we compare production at that time to the damage the production, the strike of 1896 did to production, this didn't have that large an effect compared to the strike. So in 1893, there was another incident, there was other exploration, deep exploration done on the far east side of the district that resulted in the discovery of bonanza gold in the Ibex mine. This view looks west toward the Mosquito Range, Leadville, California Gulch for reference, and the highest peak in Colorado for Mount Elbert in the distance, as well as Mount Massive. The Ibex mine is in the foreground. In January of 1892, the Ibex Mining Company took over the Little Johnny Shaft on Breeze Hill. They decided to deepen it to look, the Little Johnny had produced in the 1880s and had been explored a little bit in the early 1890s, but they decided to sink the shaft to see if they could find a deeper resource. They made a rich strike in April 13 of 1892 in the Little Johnny Shaft. The ore was described as blankets of loosely packed quartz crystals and gold in a porous jasper. This jasper is a silicate, amorphous silicate mineral. The gold generally was described as ranging from 1 to 4 ounces per ton. Lots of a few to 100 pounds contained 4 to 5 ounces to pound, and one small lot contained 50% gold. Astonishing stuff. Here's a specimen that is in the National Mining Hall of Fame and Museum collection. It weighs 14 ounces and is about 6 inches wide, and it was collected in the Little Johnny mine in 1892. And I want to thank Jordan Bennett, who is the curator of the National Mining Hall of Fame and Museum, for that photograph. This is a graph of production, net smelter returns in unadjusted dollars from the Ibex mine from 1892 to 1901. It took off, the production took off meteorically. This is the kind of mining stock that every one of us wants to buy. Peak production was in 1895, when it produced over $1.4 million or 1.6 billion 2020 GDP equivalent dollars. Now, everyone would want to own that sort of stock, and J.J. Brown did. J.J. had come to Leadville in 1882, and he had worked in the mines and advanced to superintendent. He had stock in the Little Johnny and did well. After the little Johnny discovery and the dividends started coming in, he and his wife, Molly, and their children moved from their small house on 300 East 7th Street to a small mansion in downtown in Denver. That mansion is now a museum. It's called the Molly Brown House. I can recommend it highly if you're in Denver. Here's a picture of Molly in 1894, dressed to go to a ball. Another picture of Molly in 1911, receiving an award from the captain of the ship that rescued the Titanic survivors. Molly was on that ship and was a heroine and helped save many people from the sinking. Ibex Mine, town of Ibex, probably around 1895. There's so much production from the Ibex mines, a town developed actually to serve the miners and the miners' needs and the business needs of the mines. Little Johnny is located here. The town of Ibex can be seen in the foreground. Some of the other Ibex shafts are in the background. This is a Sanborn map of the town of Ibex, 1995. Little Johnny is shown here. If you look closely at the Sanborn map, you can see houses, individual residences, boarding houses, barbershops, groceries in the town. It was a regular town. Probably had upwards of 100 people, possibly more. Now, deep exploration continued in the district, and by 1895, a number of mines had been developed within the downtown area and residential area of Leadville. One that was sunk, shaft was sunk in 1895, was the Coronado. This is a cross section through the Coronado mine, and it shows the first drill hole, diamond drill hole that was drilled in Leadville, the Bob Ingersoll hole. And it stopped 36 feet short of an ore body at the contact between the white porphyry and the Leadville limestone. The Coronado, however, didn't stop at the white porphyry. It continued down, and at 560 feet, it intercepted 170 feet of carbonate mineralization. This is a photograph taken early on in the history of the Coronado, about 1895, and it shows houses in the residential area. I looked up the residents of the houses. This house was occupied by Thomas Carroll, a miner. This by Mrs. Hannah Sullivan. This house by Richard Foley, a miner. Now, in 1896, the miners union decided that they wanted to go back to a $3 base pay in the mines. And the original agreement stated that their pay would be reduced to $2.50 an hour, a day, excuse me, until the price of silver went over 83 cents. It hadn't. It was still down in the 60s. So the miners decided to strike. And the strike actually affected Leadville production much more than the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act or the 1893 panic. Strike began in June 20th of 1886. Things were fairly calm until September 21st, early in the morning, 1896, when a gun battle between strikers and guards and miners at the Coronado and the Robert Emmet broke out. Coronado was burned. You can see its wreckage here. Interestingly enough, none of the houses in the view were damaged. 6 men were killed on both sides, both miners and strike breakers and, miners, strikers, and unfortunately 1 fireman was killed, shot in the back while turning his hose on the fire. Because of the riot and violence on the 21st, martial law was declared, and the Colorado militia was dispatched to Leadville to enforce martial law. The strike kind of began to peter out by 1897. Miners began trickling back to work. The mines had been hiring non-union people to operate. And by that summer, the strike was over. And interestingly enough, as far as I know, there were no blacklists in Leadville after the strike, and miners were not rounded up and deported during the strike. This is a graph of production from 1892 to 1899 Leadville production. The end of the price support was in 93, and actually after 93, there wasn't really a big dip in production, and production actually increased until 1895. The effects of the strike are seen here with a rather drastic decrease in production. Now, the next big event that affected Leadville production was the widespread use of galvanization, which skyrocketed demand for zinc. Up until galvanization was developed, iron goods didn't have a very long life because they would corrode. Anything that needed to be long lasting and was exposed to weather would have to be made of brass, which is much more expensive. There was a galvanization revolution right before the turn of the century. Demand also increased because of the late 19th century development of the miracle building material, galvanized corrugated steel. And by 1903, zinc production surpassed silver production. And except for one short period after that, silver production never surpassed zinc production. Zinc carbonate was discovered in 1909 in large quantities in the Wolftone mine in 1910. This set off exploration for carbonates throughout the district and actually precipitated a boom, the zinc carbonate boom. The Wolftone mine, massive zinc carbonate was discovered in the Wolftone mine in 1910. It was discovered by S.D. Nicholson. And up until that time, zinc carbonate hadn't really been known, or at least known in the district. Emmons, in his pivotal work in 1883, did not identify zinc carbonate. He saw other zinc, small quantities of other zinc minerals, but he didn't see the zinc carbonate. In fact, up until through the silver boom, zinc was penalized by the smelters because it tends to rob, has a higher affinity to alloy with lead, with silver than lead, and will rob and decrease silver production. So 1910, S.D. Nicholson, president of AMW Company, discovers the high-grade zinc carbonates in the Wolftone mine. They're found to be up to 100 feet thick, and some of it up to 50% metallic zinc. S.D. is an interesting person too. He came to Leadville in 1881 as an immigrant, and he eventually in 1920 was elected United States Senator. The stained glass image to the right depicts him, and it's as a senator and United States Senator, and it hangs in the Colorado State Capitol. Anyway, the discovery triggered the zinc boom, and SD decided to celebrate with the good fortune and great amount of money that the Wolftone mine made as a result of it. He celebrated with an underground banquet. This is an outline of the Wolftone plant and some of the underground workings. It shows what's known as by locals as the EPA wedding cakes. The Wolftone plant and shaft are here under one of the wedding cakes. This is the tunnel to the banquet hall. The banquet hall was located here. Banquet was in January of 1911. This is a photograph of people that were invited to the banquet in front of the shaft house at the Wolftone. I've never had a count, but I bet there's close to 100 people there. And for the banquet, the drift that ran to the banquet hall was lighted with electric lights. The car that they rode down the shaft in was decorated like an elevator from the city, from down in a department store in downtown Denver. This is the only known photograph of the banquet, and it does not show attendees of the banquet. It shows the staff that supported the banquet. The gentleman in the white coat is the maitre d'. Leadville boomed during World War I, and actually total production eclipsed the production during the silver boom, but it didn't last long. the post-World War I commodity price depression hit Leadville hard. It was the worst times that occurred in Leadville in its mining history. Things revived a little bit during the 20s, but the Great Depression hit Leadville even worse, nearly bringing mining to a halt. Now, beginning in the late 30s, a consortium of Newmont, Hecla, and Asarco began exploring the district to see if there was enough ore to produce and open a new mine or rejuvenate an old mine. This was the beginning of the Resurrection Project. They found that there was ore in the Resurrection mine, and to produce it, they revitalized the 3.5 mile long Yak Tunnel to haul the ore and to drain the mine. From 1941 till 1957, the Resurrection Mining Company produced 1.4 million tons of ore. This is a picture of the Yak Tunnel. What can you say? It looks tunnel-like. This is the Yak Mill that was constructed at the portal of the Yak Tunnel. It burned in 1957 at the end of production of the Resurrection. After the end of production from the Resurrection, the district was essentially dormant until 1970. And in 1970, exploration that was done once again by Newmont, Hecla, and Asarco identified ore in what was known as the Downdropped Block, a deep area on the east side of Leadville that hadn't been developed previously because exploration was so expensive there. Black Cloud is located in Iowa Gulch. The Black Cloud ore bodies were developed by sinking a shaft to Black Cloud mine site and driving a tunnel over 1 mile to the Irene number 2 to the north. It's called the Black Cloud 1250 level. California Gulch. Black Cloud ore bodies, and there were multiple ore bodies found, are shown in red. This is the Irene shaft, the 1250 level. This is a Sunday stock, a big block of igneous rock in the middle of the area, of the mine area. And the Black Cloud shaft and mill were located here. From 1970 to 1999, the Black Cloud produced 4.5 million tons of ore. And as I recall, because I can't see it at the bottom of the screen, this was valued at about $11 billion in 2011 metals values. So this is a picture of the Black Cloud taken from a screen grab of the VCR in 1985, shows the shaft head frame and the mill. This is a photograph taken in 2009 of the hoist house and the head frame. The mine and the mill, the shaft and the mill were dismantled in 2012 by Resurrection Mining Company. Now, Leadville has made a transition in the 21st century from mining to tourism. On the left is one of the summer activities. It's a burro race. In the middle, Leadville is a mecca for bicyclers. There's the national class Leadville 100 series, where bicyclers come from all over the world to compete in a 100-mile course that goes up to, I think, almost 13,000 feet. There's miles and miles of single track. There's also a paved trail that loops the mining district that is basically an outdoor mining museum that's on an old railroad grade that's easy to ride. Another winter activity is ski joring, where a horse pulls a skier over jumps, and it's a timed event. Leadville is also a good it's a good winter destination because Leadville was within 45 minutes to an hour of 5 destination ski areas: Summit, Breckenridge ski area, Copper Mountain ski area, Vale ski area, Arrowhead, and Beaver Creek. It also has its own local ski area, which is quite fun and only 15 minutes away. In the summer, Leadville is a great summer destination because it seldom gets above 80 degrees. So many times people end talks with sunset photos. I'm going to end this talk with a sunrise photo. Leadville is booming right now. It's another boom. It's a real estate and development boom and housing boom. Many subdivisions are going in. Leadville has been discovered by people looking for weekend retreats, by people working remotely. Anyway, that's the end of my talk, and I thank you for your patience, and thank you for attending and watching.
Wow, wonderful. And a lot of research went into that, into all that information.
Well, thank you.
Have any questions? Put it into the chat. Early one I saw was Curtis asked about the matchless and baby doe mines.
Right. The matchless is a claim on Friar Hill. It was owned by H.E.W. Tabor. He never capitalized it, although in 1889 it was transferred to a stock company. Matchless Mining Company. I don't know that stock was ever issued. Later, it was transferred to the Tabor Mines and Mills. Its heyday of production was through 1884 when high grade was produced. After that, the grade was much lower. It was something that one of the only assets that Horace managed to hang on to, even though from 1895 until it was foreclosed on in 1928, it was held by mortgagees. Elizabeth Tabor, his second wife, lived at the Matchless off and on in a cabin there. She leased the mine many times from 1900 to 1925. And in 1928, it was foreclosed by Shargo Mining Company. In 1935, she passed away in the cabin at the mine under poor means. Now, the Matchless Mine and Baby Doe's cabin is a museum now. It's owned by the National Mining Hall of Fame, and it can be visited. The number 6 shaft and head frame are still there, although you can't go underground. The shaft is caved at about 60 feet, but it's available for surface tours.
Okay. Another question was the zinc high grade enough to be used in brass cartridges?
That was one place that demand came from during World War II, was for zinc cartridges. Zinc, of course, that occurs in Leadville is a sulfide mineral, and it has to be smelted to become metallic zinc. And one of the advances that occurred around before the turn of the century was a breakthrough in smelting zinc by a Belgian company. Leadville, actually, some early Leadville zinc ores from Leadville were shipped to Belgium. And interestingly enough, the zinc mineralization in Leadville, it's sphalerite, zinc sulfide, but it contains a high concentration of iron. It's black and it's known as marmotite. It's magnetic. So before the development of flotation process, it could be separated by electromagnets. And this is one of the impetus for electrifying the district. Many of the mines put in zinc circuits that required electrical generation. By 1903, a large-scale steam turbine plant was put in to supply electricity to the district.
And for the ones that picked up on it, the Molly Brown was the famous one. So that was answered during your program by actually Curtis, who actually we found out before we started the program that Curtis worked in the area out there in Leadville early on in his life. So maybe I need to get Curtis to do a program about his experiences working out there. But a lot of comments about the great program, and several enjoyed the discussion how the ores were formed and how you mixed the human interest story in with the mining history. Very, very well done program. Yes, I totally agree.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions before We, as you know, we do video.
Thanks. Great show.
Okay.
Thank you.
We do video our programs, and it will be processed tonight and be put on our website, jonesgeo.com, under the Zoom Rock Room. Probably by 10 o'clock tonight, it will be on the website that you can share it with some other people or watch it again. So, Fred, we really appreciate your time and your knowledge. If we ever come to Leadville, we're going to sign you up as a tour guide for us.
Please do. Let me know. Give me a little advance warning so I'll be sure to be there.
Anyway, I came up with a book title that has never been written. It's called Running to the Outhouse by Willie Make It, illustrated by Betty Won't.
Man, that one goes back to elementary school.
Uh-oh.
Jerry, do you know the website called on Facebook, the thread called Good Cheesy Jokes?
No, I don't use any good jokes.
Well, you might want to take a look at that particular post.
Are you trying to give me a hint, huh?
Yeah.
Good cheesy jokes. No, but we'll check it out for you. Recommendation, okay. All right. I think I covered everything I needed to do. Let me check, make sure we didn't miss anything in the chat room. Andrew said his the girth tight video is now on YouTube that you saw tonight. So, okay, again, we thank Fred for joining us tonight, and we hope we see Elizabeth in here. In fact, I did see Elizabeth in here tonight in the room, and she hopefully will be with us in October to talk about the National Hall of Fame and Mining Museum in Leadville. So we're gonna let you go. Everybody have a great 2 weeks until we see you in early September. Right now, that program scheduled is the Geology of South Mountain and the Frederick Valley in Maryland. However, that could change if one of our letters out there, if somebody wants to respond and do that night, I'll give up my program. So everybody have a great time until we see you next time, and enjoy this nice weather. We will see y'all.
Thanks a lot, Jerry.